Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Cynthia Schwartz, and I'm a member of the competitive intelligence community with SLA. And I'd like to welcome everybody to this afternoon's webinar on the competitive advantage of foresight with Sina Sharp. I'd like to begin with a couple of just quick housekeeping items, as we call them. And primarily, the first and most important, of course, is to thank our sponsor, Aurora WDC. They've been a longtime sponsor of the CIC community, and we're very happy to have them sponsor again today. And Liz Frickleton of Aurora, who has been absolutely instrumental in getting us all off and running today. Next slide, please, Sina. So I just want to let all of you know about some upcoming events. The annual conference, of course, which begins October 5th, and then live sessions from the 14th to the 16th. It's online, it's virtual, it's interactive. The registration is open. You can just go to sla.org for those details. Of course, as I said at the beginning, the CI community has a competitive and decision intelligence certificate program that I wanted to let all of you know about. It enhances research, analysis, and intelligence skills. It increases your value and your support of competitive intelligence and planning and decision making in your own organization. The courses are both recorded lectures as well as live discussions, and it's very flexible to meet your schedule. The dates are in front of you. From the 5th to the 23rd is knowledge management for CI, and from November 2nd to the 20th is management analysis. And if you would like a full course description, of course, visit sla.org and click the Learn tab. Next slide, please. And primarily with enormous respect and gratitude, we're excited to honor our award recipients for this year. Congratulations to Sarah DeWitt and JP Radicek. Sarah is this year's recipient of the CI Community's Outstanding New Leader Award. She has been a tremendous conference planner for us this year, so come to all of the events. She is currently serving on the content committee for the CI Community as the conference planner. And JP is this year's recipient of the CI Community's Profound Impact Leader. JP is currently serving as past chair of the community, and congratulations to both of you. JP is charming, Sarah's fabulous, so we're thrilled to have them with us. The next slide, please. And we want to thank all of you for coming today, because it makes us successful, and we hope, of course, yourselves successful. And we hope that you'll be able to participate a lot in today's discussion. We have polls, we have all kinds of cool stuff. And we also want you to know that one lucky attendee will be the winner of a $25 gift card. And as you can see, what a previous giveaway winner has said to us. So you'll be sure to watch your email, because if it's you, you'll find out. Next slide. And we are doing live tweeting during the webinar. The hashtag is in front of you, CIC webinar. Encourage you to use it, send it off to your network. We'd be thrilled to have that. And now we come to for our main event today. Please let me introduce you to Sina Sharp. You know you have the expert when a major publisher commissions our speaker to write a CI book, Competitive Intelligence Advantage: How to Minimize Risk, Avoid the Surprises, and Grow Your Business in a Changing World. It has earned more 5-star reviews than any book on CI. Sina Sharp is a pioneer in competitive intelligence, establishing Sharp Market Intelligence in 1979, serving global clients in more than 200 industries. Born in Brooklyn, she had a successful corporate career in New York City, including her best job at BBDO Advertising, think Mad Men. She earned her master's degree in mathematics from NYU, New York University, and then moved to Los Angeles. She is a CI fellow and was inducted into the Hall of Fame from the Association for Strategic Planning. Her global speaking engagements have ranged from Harvard Business School's Entrepreneurial Summit, to a professional association in a nightclub, to a video class in Australia at 1 a.m. I'm very pleased to turn this over to Sina and learn how to seize competitive advantage with foresight. Sina, take it away.
Thanks so much, Cynthia, and thanks also to Liz and SLA and Aurora for this opportunity to speak with all of you. And it's great to speak with SLA again. In 2011, I had the privilege of making several presentations at your annual conference in Philadelphia, and I just have left with wonderful memories of that time. When I think back, I say, 2011 seems decades ago from 2020, especially when you think about the business world and what's been happening this past year. Before COVID, the #1 goal of almost every CEO in a survey was growth, whether you measure that growth in revenues and profits, number of customers, number of products or services, market served, however it was measured. The #1 thing that CEOs wanted was to grow their company. Well, today, the #1 goal is to stay in business. And if you can grow a little bit, that's absolutely terrific. So how do you grow? How do you survive in this environment? Well, one way to not only survive, but to succeed today is to have a new awareness of what's today's reality, along with what the customer wants today. So I'm going to focus on how to gain foresight and learn to see what others don't and uncover opportunities that you and your company can use. That's your competitive advantage. So before we get started, I just wanted to get a sense of what all of you are living with in your companies, and if we can do a poll to understand how innovative your company is, or how much do you, your companies have successful new products, new target customers, new services. Let's see. Okay, do we have that poll?
Hi, Sina, this is Liz. I am working on launching that poll right now here.
So basically, I just want you to think about this is going to be a very quick poll. It's whether your company is has, there's a fair number of new iterations of what you're doing in your company, or coming up with new ideas, whether it's frequent or rare or occasional. But if not, we can just go ahead.
I am having a little bit of a technical issue here getting that to launch. Austin, if you have any success there, feel free to jump in as well. Let's see, well, just give us a minute.
Okay. Okay, talk amongst yourselves.
Okay, there we go. All right, the poll is on the screen for you to go ahead and submit your responses.
Okay, so just think about it in terms of, as I said, new products, new services, new different types of customers. All right, we'll close the poll in 5 seconds.
All right.
Okay, and I do not see the poll.
All right, we're looking at poll results on the screen right now. So what we're looking at, Sina, and if this isn't visible on your side of things, we had the most responses coming in on the second answer, occasionally, coming in at 65%, followed by rarely at 27%, and then the smallest percent there with frequently at 15%.
Okay. All right, good. That's a good beginning. Lets me know what you're dealing with in your companies. So I hope that when you leave today, you'll have some ideas on how you can recognize what's shifting and changing, but it will give you an advantage that you can bring forth to your company's ideas. So generally, when we are thinking about the future and making decisions, most companies, most departments use the things that have always been taught to. We look at our experience, data and facts, predictions, groupthink, scenario planning, gut assumptions, industry thinking, and common sense. And these are things that we're all familiar with. You may use one of them, several of them, however it is. But what we usually fail to realize is that all of these things in the purple box, these are all based on yesterday. Now, predictions are the one that you might think looking ahead is the one that's most likely to give us an idea of what's happening, because especially when we look at predictions from experts. So let me just show you some predictions from experts in the past and what they said. Bill Gates said 16 years ago that spam would be solved in 2 years. In 1968, Business Week didn't think that the Japanese were going to get much share of the auto market in the US. Margaret Thatcher, who was Prime Minister of the UK from 1979 to 1990, said 10 years before she became Prime Minister that she couldn't imagine a woman having a top job in the UK at all. And finally, Variety in 1955 said that rock and roll will be gone by June. Well, generally, when we look at predictions or we look back on predictions, they usually provide a good laugh. Occasionally, there are some predictions that are a little bit on target, but more often than not, they're just not giving us what we need. So it's not to look at them, because at least it gets us thinking about the future. But what else can we do to become aware and have more certainty than with a prediction? Because a prediction is a guess about the future. So as I said, we need new thinking, new approaches, and awareness. And that happens by becoming aware of what is emerging, what is unfolding. And by the fact that it's unfolding and emerging means it's already happening. And if it's already happening, there are companies or individuals that are already buying into that change. So whether it's a new product, or whether it's a new packaging approach, or whether it's going after different customers, it's already occurring, but it's unknown. So my goal today is to give you some ways of making those changes known to you. So the first one I want to start off with is to pay very close attention to societal and business changes. We certainly have been hit with a mega dose of that this year, but this is the one that I think is the easiest technique, and the one that we see all the time. So when we started the lockdown with COVID, parents were working at home. So Fisher-Price immediately designed a new product, My Home Office, for kids 3 years and up. So they would have, when they're sitting next to mom and dad, they have a little laptop made out of wood, and a smartphone, and a headset, and a cup to drink in, just like mom and dad. They also did the same thing. They came up with a baby biceps test. This came out last month, for 3 months and up. So that when mom and dad are exercising at home, baby can be doing the same thing. They paid attention to the changes, which they were aware of, but then thought about, how can we apply it to our company? And as you can see, this is what they came up with. So the idea is to think about what's changing and how can you apply it to your company. When some bars in various countries began opening up, there was a lot of concern about how do you keep people apart? How do you keep them spaced? Not only because bars are in smaller areas, but after you've had a drink or two, that becomes increasingly difficult. Well, this bar in England, East England, the bar is in the red oval on this slide. So that's how small the bar is. The large graphic is a parking lot. They had an artist design this graphic, and all of those circles are areas where patrons can drink. It's very clear where the social distancing is. They don't have to worry about people meandering over to others, and it takes the care of that issue with keeping them apart, so that this bar has a much better chance of not only people coming because it looks so cool, but of not having problems with patrons in the bar. As you know, the United States cannot really travel to most other countries. They don't want us, but in Bermuda, as well as several Caribbean countries, they have come up with a program that allows people from the US as well as other countries to come and live and work there. And each country has different rules. In Bermuda, they're saying you'll be exempt from income tax. Other countries say you don't need a visa. But the point is, you can go to a lovely resort area, great weather. You don't have to be confined indoors when you're working. You have things to do when you're not working. You have beautiful beaches and all that. They were one of the few that were able to fill up their hotels, or fill up some of their hotels, when most hotels are struggling. Go first. So after George Floyd's death, there was a lot of discussion about the difficulties for Black people to have businesses, and we found out that their businesses were the ones that were most likely to fail, and there was a problem. So one of the things that Sephora did is they committed to allotting 15% of their shelf space to Black-owned businesses. Again, responding to societal changes and issues. Brand Week is one of the major advertising publications. They have an annual conference called Brand Week Masters Live. Usually that's in person. This year it wasn't going to be, but they don't have a very large number of people that are of color or LGBTQ, etc. So this year, what they did, again, in view of knowing that a lot of people can't attend this, not because of the distance, but because they don't have the money, they're small agencies that are owned by people of color, LGBTQ, usually have much smaller businesses. So they made their conference free to the first 100 companies that applied to do that. They're responding to the changes, and they're getting people involved, interested, engaged with their brand or their company or their products. We hear a lot about how office buildings are deserted. Nobody's there, and some of them, they're going to be totally empty because leases aren't being renewed, or some of the newer office buildings, they are going to cancel those leases. Well, this is a company in Finland that started this platform to grow have vertical farms. And what that does is that they're located in central cities in these empty office buildings. And so people have the opportunity to enjoy the fresh produce that's even fresher than what you could get in the store when it has to be shipped, trucked in. So they have fresher produce, it's much more convenient, and having this organic hydroponic produce is very appealing to millennials and Gen Z who are looking for companies that are appealing to their values. It's not just in Finland. There's a company called Plenty that started their second hydroponic farm. Hydroponic means growing without soil, in Compton. Now, Compton is in Los Angeles, and it's not exactly the wealthiest or the hippest area, but they took an old building and they are creating these vertical farms, so also employing people from the neighborhood. Of course, hydroponic only uses water and they don't use much, so they're saving up to 90% or more water than they ordinarily will. And this is going on all throughout the United States. Larry Ellison is involved with one called Sensei Ag. So the thing is, they're taking advantage, or they're seeing opportunities based on the changes that are happening around them. Let's look back at some that did this very successfully in the past. This is nothing new. It's just that there's more of a need for it now. In 2014, CVS announced that they weren't going to be selling any more tobacco products. Well, their competitors and the business community thought they were absolutely crazy because tobacco accounts for a decent amount of revenue for CVS, plus it accounts for even more profit. So what happened when they stopped selling it? The next year, their sales increased $2 billion. And they were able to shift their branding to be known as a wellness company. Very important. So this has been going on for a very long time, but there's even more need and more opportunity today. When California legalized marijuana shops, some very clever parent took their daughter, a table, lots of Girl Scout cookies, and set up outside a pot shop. Seize the moment of change. Even the Pope recognized that there are changes happening. There's a website that you might be interested in. It's called COVID Innovations. Okay, so just covidinnovations.com. They have more than 1,000 ideas there. One of them is a company in the US called Paranoid Fan. It used to help sports fans find parking lots and get their food to their seats, but now they're shifted to supporting food banks. We hear about companies, of course, doing this all the time. This is nothing new. You have heard about it. But if you want some more ideas, this might be a very good source for you, covidinnovations.com. Unilever's new career fair in this time of COVID created their ability to find jobs for people and put it in the form of an online game. Very appealing to younger people looking for work. 2 textile companies joined forces and have created a fabric that they maintain destroys the outer layer of COVID. It's made with silver fibers. Again, what can you do that will work in today's environment? McKinsey just had an article last month on the next normal consumer. Again, this is a way to understand some of the things that are happening and changing. So if you're interested in reading this article, rather than writing down this very long URL, just go to mckinsey.com and search for the article, Meet the Next Normal Consumer. Trend Watching is a wonderful website that is monthly. They have a fee-based part of it and a free. But even if you just do the free part of it, you really get some very good ideas for what other companies are doing. So in the July issue, they stated that 90% of consumers want their companies to be involved in some aspect of the pandemic, of making it all better. And that's not a surprise because we know that people want things to be better overall. In the UK, there's a company called Change Please that is training homeless people to work as baristas. Nanify is a Spanish-based app that ordinarily would be placing nannies, but now they are having their nannies do online babysitting for parents. So it not only helps the parents, but it keeps their nannies employed. So there are lots of great places to go for good ideas. They're all around the place, all over. So this first technique that I'd like you to think about is to pay attention to societal and business changes. Okay. Now, we very often think that, well, okay, we missed that opportunity. I heard about that one. We didn't act on it. It's not something that goes away. Somebody else will seize that momentum, will seize that opportunity and take the ones you missed. So it's not that you seize everyone, but that you carefully consider what is most appropriate for your company. What I suggest you do is, I've given you a lot of examples, I'll have many more, and you might say to yourself, well, none of these really apply to me. They don't apply to my industry, they don't apply to the kind of work I'm doing. But whenever you notice anything, whenever you see, hear, read anything that gets your attention, that you think that's a great idea or that's clever, but I can't think of any way that I could use it, you most likely won't. It takes time for it to percolate, those ideas to percolate. What I suggest you do is create 2 folders, online and manual. And every time you come across something that you think, that's a great idea, capture enough of it, of the idea in text, and put it in either one of those files, and then go back and revisit it after a month, after 2 months, after 3 months. Over time, some of those ideas will be relevant for your company. So you don't have to do it immediately, something you have to do immediately, because so few companies, as we saw from the poll, are really coming out with something new because they don't know where it is, where to find it, or how to implement it. But if you just let it percolate, some of them will have some meaning for your company. The second way of gaining more awareness of what's happening and seizing the momentum is to borrow good ideas. I've heard this from Bill Gates several times over the last few weeks, where he has said that when he was making decisions at Microsoft, and even today, he always asks 2 questions. Who has dealt with this problem well? What can we learn from them? Borrow good ideas. Borrow good ideas not only from other companies, other industries, even events, people. It doesn't even have to be in business. Whenever somebody is successful, that is something you know already works. Another company's success is your test market. We don't have to guess, like with predictions, is it going to work? We already know it works. Whether it works for your company is something that you have to figure out. And to the extent that you customize it for your company, you have a better chance of it working. So these test markets result in less risk for your company. So let me give you some ideas. The first loyalty program that we had very successful was American Airlines Advantage, which started in 1981. Now, there was another program back in the 50s, green stamps, but it was pretty unsophisticated. American Airlines came out with this frequent flyer program in 1981. Well, as you all know, virtually every airline developed their own loyalty program, every hotel chain, every auto rental company, as well as hundreds of other businesses, whether they were bookstores or dry cleaners or restaurants or anybody who thought that they could have an advantage by offering a loyalty program. And the reason it works is that there's a benefit to the customer because we're going to get something from it. It's also a benefit to the company because unless you have a specific brand or a specific company you want to buy from, if it doesn't make that much difference, you're more likely to purchase from a place where you are participating in their loyalty program. So it's all kinds of firms that you know about, including sports firms, sports groups. So let me give you some examples of what some other companies have done that have been very successful that you might think about is there some way that I can learn from them. The Ritz-Carlton is known for their customer service. They are considered the premier company in customer service. Well, they were having a lot of companies call them up and saying, what are you doing? Can you tell us what you're doing? Can you give us some details about it? So they established the Ritz-Carlton Leadership Center. You might think that most of the people that would come to this program, it was usually 1 or 2 days, would be from the hospitality industry, other hotels or maybe restaurants. But look at who some of their customers are. The US Navy, the New Jersey Devils. So anybody who understands that they need to improve their customer service understood that they could learn something from Ritz-Carlton. This gave Ritz-Carlton an opportunity to not only leverage their expertise, something they were already doing, but it obviously brought in additional revenues to them. This was nothing that they had ever planned, but as they were getting more and more requests for it, they saw the opportunity to expand what they were doing already. Apple stores actually went to Ritz-Carlton to help them not only with customer service, but also training. Apple also went to Disney to teach them about crowd control. As Bill Gates said, who has already done this well and what can I learn from them? So it's not to copy, it's what can I learn from them? A number of years ago, NORDSTROM set up a place in some of their stores to provide mammograms. Now, that might seem quite odd, but what they reasoned is that there were a number of women who weren't getting mammograms for a whole variety of reasons. But if they were in Nordstrom's, it was a much more friendly place. So they created it. It was a medical area. They had doctors there. They had all the latest equipment doing it. Their first year, they had 8,000 customers came to Nordstrom's for mammograms. So it not only had the benefit of diagnosing any possible breast cancer, but they usually, the person who was having the screening would usually come with somebody else who may or may not have a screening. But they found that when they did that, on the day they had the screening, that Nordstrom sales were up an additional $400 per person who had a screening. This is a coffee shop in New Jersey, Modca. And as you know, who mostly goes to cafes and coffee shops, and especially a small independent one for people who are younger. And they love learning about the whole coffee process. So finally, after they were people who were in the store were constantly inundated with, what beans are you using and how do you roast them and what's the proper proportion, etc. They decided to create a course. And what they did is, as a result of creating a course, is that they sold more beans. The people who were coming to the cafe became even more loyal to them. They were able to have improved their recruiting process, because these were people who love coffee, presented themselves, came to these classes, so they knew who they were. It allowed them to be a differentiator in the coffee shop market in that area of New Jersey, and it gave them additional income. The point is, when you see a good idea, is that you can't copy it, but you have to adapt it to to your own company and see what parts of it fit. So it's just an idea. If it doesn't fit at all, you might use some of these examples or other examples that you find as a way to get people in your team thinking about new ideas. The more we hear about what other companies have done successfully, the more our juices are flowing and we come up with other thoughts and suggestions on what we can do. The third technique I'd like to discuss is to observe and listen. And this one, I'm going to go through the rest of them pretty quickly. So Chris Martin, who is the lead singer for the rock band Coldplay, was giving an interview. And he said something that was very interesting that I've never forgotten. And what he said is that when he's performing or performed in large arenas, the lights were so bright that he couldn't see the audience, but he could see the exit signs all around the arena. When he saw people or shadows in those exits, he made a mental note that he had chosen the wrong playlist, because nobody ever left when Coldplay was playing their favorite songs. He observed what was going on in the arena. Did you ever wonder how McDonald's became a competitor to Starbucks in coffee? Well, a number of employees, there is, thousands of stores all over the US worldwide, but a number of employees noticed that customers would come in to order McDonald's, and some of them would carry a cup of Starbucks. Well, McDonald's was offering Starbucks. Why weren't they buying McDonald's coffee? They didn't like it. They wanted Starbucks coffee. So when the management heard enough of their employees mentioning it, they did a test market. And what they did is they hired a barista, started offering this kind of coffee. It was so successful, they rolled it out to the entire company. As a result, analysts who look at all their profits and loss for the year and everything claimed that that first year that McDonald's rolled it out to all of their stores was the main reason why their sales had increased that much. So they were offering what their customers wanted, but never asked for, but was showing with it. So observe and learn. You know what, before we go to this one, Liz, can we do the second poll? Liz?
Yes, so Sina, we have the poll up on the screen for the audience to respond to.
Okay, so here what I'm asking you for is, what are some of the ways that you think, either that you do or that you think are good ways to pick up some of these kinds of ideas, or to find out what are some of the changes or trends that are happening that might be useful for your company in terms of noticing it. I don't want you to agonize over it. Just pick out the one that you think is probably will give you the greatest feedback for your company.
And we're at 58% voted, 60%. So keep those votes coming in. We'll close it in just a couple seconds here. Let's maybe do 5 more seconds. Get your votes in. And Austin, you can go ahead and close that. Show the results on screen. So yes. Sina, are you able to see those too?
No.
Okay. Let's see. So we had kind of two top results. The top one being podcast, books, blogs, and articles about the future, coming in at 81%, followed closely by social media at 74%, then millennial Gen Z folks, and then industry trade, and finally mainstream newspapers at 48%.
Okay. Well, actually, all of these and none of these. All of these because input on what's shifting and changing, where opportunities are, is all around us all the time. But it's not just, as I said, these 5 areas that are on the poll, but also, as you can see, with observing or borrowing good ideas from others. So while we pay attention to podcasts and books that extends our information and lets us know more things, it's also so many other things that we can't search for. And that's one of the points I want to get across to you, is that it's very difficult when you are looking for new ideas on things that your company can consider. Well, when you want to identify what are the main business and societal changes, it's very hard to do a search on them. Sometimes even when I've looked for articles on trends, the word trend is never even included. So I'm not suggesting you don't do searching and you're not listening to podcasts, which I love to do and use them quite a bit. But what I'm saying is that it's many other places beyond that. So besides this, let me give you another example. Plano is a company that makes these metal fishing tackle boxes. And as you can see in the graphic on the bottom, in the 1980s, they were having a meeting of all their salesmen, and they were all men. And they were going to be discussing a whole bunch of items. The VP of sales and marketing wandered in the back and just sat there, just listening silently while they were having this meeting. During the course of the meeting, one of the salesmen said, I heard something really weird from one of my vendors. And he said, we've been selling a number of these tackle boxes to meeting planners. So when they're planning a meeting, when we used to have them in person and they needed to have all this paraphernalia with them, from paper clips to scotch tape to pens and whatever they needed, this was a perfect vehicle for carrying this stuff around. Later on in the meeting, another guy popped up and during the course of the discussion, and he said, I've heard from some of my vendors that women are coming in and buying these for all their sewing stuff. In those days, there really weren't dedicated boxes just for sewing paraphernalia. So they were buying these tackle boxes and they were putting their stuff in it. Finally, later on in the meeting, another guy was passing on some information that he had heard from his vendors, the companies that they sold to. And he said, they're telling me that teenage girls are buying our boxes and using them for cosmetics. Well, the guys thought this was the funniest thing and just couldn't imagine that they could possibly be using it for that. As I said, the VP of sales and marketing was sitting in the back, and he remembered this part of the conversation, and it stuck with him, but he didn't know what to do with it. So over the course of several days and a few weeks, he had an idea. And Plano has their own factory. So he had them take these very same boxes and make them up in bright colors. And the bright colors, and they renamed the product caboodles, which I'm sure many of you are very familiar with. In 5 years, they had more revenue from caboodles than they did from the fishing tackle boxes, all because these salesmen mentioned silly things that they had heard from their vendors. Another way to stay on top of what's shifting and changing is to pay attention to people and companies who really seem to be very successful and always coming up with new ideas or ways. I mean, with Starbucks, it's not only new products, but it's also the way they pay their employees and the fact that they can get benefits with only 20 hours a week. So it's not just products and services, it could also be merchandising or packaging and trucking, many other ways. Pay attention to people or companies that seem to be ahead of everybody else in terms of always adjusting. Richard Branson has started more than 350 stores. These are obviously just a few of them. He picks industries that have barely changed or not changed at all or haven't changed very well, that are not meeting the needs of the customers. And he's always entering new and different industries. How many of you know that Virgin has a bridal shop? So the last one that I will discuss is to pay attention to comments and complaints. This one is probably one that you're all familiar with. The comments one was like, we saw that in the Plano example. But complaints also are very useful because they're telling us that the customer is not being well served. And this holds true for consumer products, commercial products, B2B, nonprofit, educational. It's all across the board, products and services. Is pay attention, because those are people that are telling you something you may not know or that has been dismissed. Semco Energy is a very successful company in Brazil. They make those cooling towers that you see on top in the graphic on the right. That's all they do, is they manufacture these mega cooling towers. Well, the company over a few years was hearing that the other companies that existed to maintain these cooling towers were just not doing a great job. And so the Semco's customers were very unhappy with the maintenance companies. After they heard that enough times, they finally decided to start their own division of maintaining their cooling towers. This was not what their business was all about. They never had any plans to get into this business, but they did because their customers were telling them there was a need. Somebody wasn't doing what they needed to. And Semco became aware of that issue that they didn't know before. And as with Ritz-Carlton, it created an additional revenue stream. As you can see, it became a $30 million business in 5 years. Not too shabby. So I'd just like to review the various techniques that I have discussed. Pay attention to societal and business changes and shifts. Is there, whether it has to do with people or the business or the product or the service, the method of getting the product to the customer, it can have to do with the trucking. Any way, any aspect of it is useful. If there is companies that have successful ideas, try to figure out what made them successful. And is there something that you can borrow from them? Adapt, don't copy. Observe and listen to what's being said by customers, by employees, by when you go to trade shows. When we go again to trade shows, always look for the opposite of what you hope to hear. Pay attention to the people who are particularly successful and are always coming up with new ideas, comments and complaints, and just to be more aware. So with that, I will turn this back to Cynthia and see if you have any questions.
Sina, I'm here. I'm going to check and see if we do have questions that have been submitted. Okay, I don't know who this is from. Hang on, I think we have one. There is a question that is slightly incomplete here, but it's asking about within the corporate environment, if you have suggestions about how, if you're not looking outward, if you're looking internally.
Right. So if they're looking internally, how to become more aware.
If you're looking for generating ideas or new thinking, if you're doing it internally, a lot of your examples were looking outward, more societal or related to the environment, but not necessarily in-house.
Okay. All right. We had one client that I thought did something that was absolutely brilliant. It was actually in the pharma space. And what they did is they set up a whiteboard in an area in the company that they knew that almost everybody in the company would pass by that whiteboard sometime over the week or month or whatever. And what they told the staff, everybody, they said, if you see or hear anything about our competitors, about the products, the industry that we're in, if you hear anything that you think might be useful for our company to know about, just scribble down a few words on the whiteboard, just enough so that you know what you were talking about. They started out having a lunch, a pizza lunch, once a month. Pizza is a great way to get people to come. And during that lunch, and they invited anybody in the company to come, whether or not you had even written down an idea. And when they came into that during lunch, what they did is they asked each person who had written something on that board to explain what it was. Many very positive things came out from that meeting. Number one, it was quite common that when that one person said, this is what I heard about a competitor, or this is an idea that somebody has thrown out, is that somebody else in the gathering would concur with them, and sometimes more than one person. Also, over time, the word got around about these lunches, and more people started coming to them. And eventually, senior management started coming to these lunches also. So it also gave everybody in the company an opportunity to meet or to mingle with the executive VPs, the CEO, the CFO, and others. It was extremely successful, and they started having it then bi-weekly and then weekly. And it was all internal information, but it was capturing it in a way that they weren't able to capture any other way.
Thank you, Sina. I'm looking at the question box and the chat box, and I'm just giving people another minute or so to enter a question. If you do have to address to our attendees, if there's something that you'd like to expand on with what Sina has presented, if there's another area that you feel that you'd like to have her observations, if you just drop that question in, and I guess this is where we do the Jeopardy music for 10 seconds so that people can do something. Ask us. And Sina, while we're waiting, there is one other thought. You did speak a lot about looking outward to other sources and the comments and complaints. And as you explained about the pizza lunch, but are there any other sources, specific sources, where you might hear or learn or just be aware of something that's new?
Right. Well, one of the things that also relates to the example I gave before is to listen to and actually engage people that you ordinarily wouldn't within your company. That is, speak to, if you have a receptionist, they hear a lot of comments when people are sitting and waiting to meet with somebody. Receptionists are very useful. Engage people that you might not think would have new ideas or good ideas. Somebody who is their first job out of high school or college, somebody who doesn't know anything about your industry, somebody who is new to the business. Engage the people that you ordinarily might not, so that that either might be ignored or dismissed or underestimated in terms of what they might be able to contribute. If you're working on a marketing problem, get people from finance involved. Do a lot of cross-function brainstorming. That it also is very, very useful. And even if it doesn't come up with a specific idea, it very often gets the conversation going.
Thank you, Sina. There is another question here, which says, what tools do you use to comb through all of the sources of the new ideas that you use and to collect the results instead of going to each source separately or setting up alerts?
Right.
So your method of organization.
Well, there's always not only way too much, but exponentially way too much information. And that's why I suggested capturing ideas or thinking in folders. And if I'm working on a particular project for a client, just in the course of doing having reading, I notice anything that is weird or bizarre or unusual that relates to that particular either industry or that particular company, and make a note of it, and then see how I can weave it into the competitive intelligence investigation we're doing for them. Sometimes it's appropriate, sometimes it's not. And even when we come up with ideas that are very clever or something that they should know about, it might even include it in an addendum. But there aren't any particular tools, because what we're looking for is all around us all the time, and we can't capture it all. And so we have to try to just take the ones that we think are the most appropriate, or maybe the ones that are most off the wall, and then review them.
Thank you. I do have another question or two here, and we have a few more minutes to get to them. This question is, for one, a thank you for the great examples. What is one of the other examples, one of the other industries the CI community as a whole should be looking at in order to make a caboodles-like surge in the corporate environment?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Let me see if I can read that again. What's one of the other industries the CI community as a whole could be looking at?
I don't know if there's any other industry. I would just say, just to be, think about again as it applies to the company you work for and the industry you work for. There may be, it might be an industry that's indirectly related. So, for example, many years ago, there basically were only one or two types of sneakers. That's it. And then slowly companies began, diversifying. So you had sneakers for basketball and for track and for everything else. I know it seems hard to believe that that's the way it was, but it was. And so once they started having all these other different types of sneakers, one of the stock makers, Thorlo, looked at that and said, well, if there are different sneakers for different sports, maybe we should have different socks for different sneakers. And that's how they came up with their wide variety of socks. They looked at an industry that was indirectly related to theirs.
I see. All right, and I believe this is our last question. And the attendee has asked, I believe you've covered this a bit already, but would you say that there are any forecasting techniques that are either underrated or maybe something that was more popular in the past and deserves a comeback
Ooh,
in terms of
good question.
forecasting techniques?
Yeah, good question. Offhand, I can't think of any, because the thing about forecasting, for the most part, it relies on what has already happened. It relies on the past. And we live in a world that is changing in such crazy ways and such unexpected, unimagined ways that if we rely on the past, we miss the things that are outliers. And that's what our world is made up of today. So it's not to ignore the data or the forecast or predictions and all that, but we have to add other ways of becoming aware, of seeing what's happening. Yeah, I'll have to think about that one. Good question.
And the very last one was no questions, but wonderful and informative, and thank you. So I would also, Sina, like to thank you very much. It has just been amazing and funny and fascinating as well. And thank you again for your insights. So Sina, if you have any closing remarks that you'd like to share, and then finalize that, and I'll do the closing housekeeping after you.
Well, I'd like to say thank you for your attention, but that's not exactly possible. Hope it was there. Hope you learned something today. And especially that the future is already here. It's just that most of us aren't aware of it. It's in our face every single day. But hopefully with these tools, you'll begin to recognize them and become aware sooner than you did. And that you become known as the person with foresight. That's your competitive advantage.
Sina, thank you again. Very, very it's just been, you know, wonderful for a Wednesday afternoon to have this much pieces to think about. So thank you. So to our attendees, just a couple of quick items just before we close at 3. I think I have 30 seconds. We do want to thank all of you for joining us, and remember that one lucky attendee will be randomly selected for the $25 gift card prize. So watch your email for that. The webinar has been recorded. And please watch for an email following the webinar. The link to the recording will be on SLA's Competitive Intelligence Community YouTube channel, and all of our other webinars are there as well. We are pausing, just as a reminder, we're going to pause the webinar program itself in October to draw everyone's focus to the conference, which runs with live sessions from the 14th to the 14th to the 16th, and also other recorded sessions beginning October 5th. And we will pick up again in November, so please watch your email for that, for more SLA CIC webinars. And stay tuned to our social media channels, because you'll see the announcements to that, and we very much love to stay in touch with all of you. So thank you all, and see you all next time. Have a good afternoon, and remember, everything becomes your foresight.